I am Dr. M.P. Changappa. I teach at NUJS as assistant professor. Today I am going to discuss about crime against wildlife, flora and fauna. This is very important, the aspect of environmental law in India, wherein lot of offences falls within the purview of crime against wildlife and flora and fauna in India. There are stringent laws we come across under the environmental law in order to tackle these kind of these offences. Let me begin with the introduction. India is among the 17 mega diversity countries. It comprises of 4 biodiversity hotspot: conservation, international Eastern Himalaya Western Ghats, Indo-Burma region and Andaman and Nicobar Islands. According to World Biogeographic classification, India lies in 2 of the major realms, Palearctic and Indo-Malaysian. The Wild Institute of India, Dehradun, has proposed a classification which divides the country into 10 biogeographic regions: Trans-Himalayan, Himalayan, Indian Desert, Semi-Arid, Western Ghats, Deccan Peninsula, Gangetic Plain, Northeast India, Iceland and coast. Owing to the India's tropical and subtropical climate, India is home to 750% of the species of animal in the world. It is account for about 92,000 species, none of which insect alone comprises of more than 61,000 species. Many species are yet to be discovered. During the early periods of Indian history, including the British period, there was some focus on forest conservation. The British had made many efforts to conserve forest, albeit for furthering their own interest, but there was less emphasis on wildlife conservation. Animals were not considered useful. Hunting was a popular sport for the British and Rajas and Maharajas alike, and they indulged in hunting as a royal, lavish game. This reduced the number of many animals in the forest. After independence, hunting got converted into many different forms of poaching for varied use of animal parts, which the enactment of different policies and laws relating to conservation of wildlife. Hunting of animals has been made illegal through legislation. Conservation of flora has also gained attention, and survey of flora and fauna has long been the mandate of Geological Survey of India and the Botanical Survey of India. The biosphere is dependent upon the proper functioning of food cycles and food webs, and any imbalance in these chains would result in disastrous consequences, as all the species on the planet are interconnected to each other despite huge difference in the mode of living, nutrition, etc. Extinction of an species is an indicator of adverse consequences not only in the environmental context but also for food security. That is why wildlife conservation assumes immense importance. This module aims to throw light on the various aspects of wildlife conservation and initiatives in that direction. Crimes against wildlife, international context, that is a convention called CITES, Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, popularly known as CITES, is an international agreement between governments. It is the only international treaty which assumes that international trade in specimen of wild animal and plants does not threaten their survival. It was signed in 1973 in Washington DC under the aegis of the IUCN, World Conservation Union. Thus, it is also known as the Washington Convention. It entered into force in 1975. The provisions of CITES are legally binding on its members, although they do not replace the national laws. India is also a party to the convention. CITES is one of the 7 important treaties relating to conservation of wildlife, flora and fauna. CITES oversees international trade in specimens of selected species through a system of control. A licensing system has been developed to authorize any trade. Each party is obliged to designate management authorities for administrative purposes and specific authorities for advisory purposes. The convention comprises of 3 appendixes according to the degree of protection they need. CITES employs certain tools for monitoring and controlling export and import. For example, in order to control poaching and illegal trade in elephant specimens, it employs mic monitoring, illegal killing of elephants, and ET's elephant trade information system prepared by traffic. Wildlife trade monitoring network. CITES alone with 4 international partners is a member of International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime. The other 4 are Interpol, UNDOC, World Bank and World Customs Organization, which was established in November 2010 in St. Petersburg, Russia during International Tiger Forum. CMS, Convention on Migratory Species of Wild Animal, popular known as CMS, was signed in 1979 in Germany, also known as the Bonn Convention, entered in force in the year 1983 under the aegis of United Nations Environment Program UNEP. It has taken a number of initiatives such as Central Asian Mammals Initiatives, Dugong MOU for protection of only herbivorous marine animal communities initiatives, World Migratory Bird Day, Raptor MOU on conservation of migratory birds of prey in Africa and Eurasia, signed in the year 2016, Marine Turtles MOU, etc. CBD, Convention on Biodiversity. The CBD was signed in 1992 at the Earth Summit, Rio de Janeiro 1992 and entered into force in 1993. It has 3 main objectives: conservation of biodiversity, sustainable use of the component, and fair and equitable sharing of benefit arising out of the biodiversity or genetic resources. It is focused on the ecosystem approach to reach the balance of 3 objectives. It covers all species and ecosystems and is legally binding. India is a party to the convention and has enacted the Biological Diversity Act 2002 to implement provisions of CBD. The Cartagena Protocol on Biosafety of the Convention, also known as the Biosafety Protocol, was adopted in 2000. It aims to protect biological diversity from the potential risk posed by living modified organisms resulting from modern biotechnology. In 2010, the Nagoya Protocol of the Convention was adopted. It deals with effective implementation of one of the 3 objectives of the CBD, the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising out of the utilization of genetic resources. Section 2, which deals about International Convention for the Regulation of Whalings. The International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling was signed in 1946 and it is the International Whaling Commission founding document. The convention includes a legally binding schedule which, amongst other things, set out catch limit for commercial and aboriginal substance whaling. Traffic Wildlife Trade Monitoring Network, established in 1976, it is the leading non-governmental organization working globally on trade in wild animal and plant, dealing with biodiversity conservation and sustainable development. It is a joint program of the WWF World Wide Fund for Nature and the IUCN World Conservation Union. Its outreach includes conservation effort for elephants, tigers, medicinal plants, etc. IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature and Natural Resources. It is an international organization founded in 1948 for conservation of nature and natural resources through its best known publication, Red Data Book. It shows the status of conservation of species across the world. It has categorized like least concerned, near, threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, extinct in the wild, extinct. This system helps countries across the world to ensure protection of their important species and contribute towards wildlife conservation. World Wildlife Fund for Nature. World Wildlife Fund is an international non-governmental organization which was established in 1961. The mandate of this foundation is to take steps to protect wildlife from threats and conserve nature in all its forms, thereby maintaining the biological diversity. The very logo of this, which is the giant panda, reaffirms the commitment to wildlife conservation. It associates with a number of partners worldwide such as Traffic, UNEP, etc. to help conserve wildlife. It publishes the Living Plant Index in association with the Zoological Society of London. Crime against wildlife, Indian context. The crimes according to the International Consortium on Combating Wildlife Crime. Wildlife crime refers to acts committing contrary to national laws and regulations intended to protect natural resources and to administer their management and use. India's wildlife is under various threats such as hunting for meat and poaching, illegal wildlife trade for various purposes, large scale deforestation and conversion of forest for other uses has rendered large elephants such as elephants susceptible to many threats, including destruction of habitat, fatal injury due to electric fencing, poaching, etc. Developmental activities take a toll on the environmental protects as the boundaries gets shifted and less land is available for protecting the natural habitat of the animal or for creating wildlife sanctuaries, national park and biosphere reserves. Many of the times people who are unaware of the law in the country, in addition to those who practice illegal trade, often indulge in killing of animals, which further brings down the population of wildlife in the country. The magnitude of wildlife crimes in India can be judged from the fact that Wildlife Protection Society of India has recorded over 20,000 wildlife crime cases related to crimes against over 400 species. According to the National Tiger Conservation Authority, 66 tigers were found dead in the country in 2014. Statistically, hunting and poaching have proved extremely harmful for nearly 37% of the birds, 37% of mammals and 8% of the plant, in addition to many reptiles and fishes. These numbers signify that there is a pressing need for conservation of the resources. Prevention wildlife including flora, fauna has been given due importance in the Constitution of India through the 7th schedule and through the directive principles of state policy article 48A and fundamental duties article 51AG, which were added later to the constitution through an amendment. Many initiatives have been taken to protect wildlife, including laws, projects, establishment of protected areas and establishment of organization and institutions. The most important laws that provide for protection of wildlife in the country are the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act 1960 and Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act 1960. Under this act, animal includes any living creature other than human beings. It extends to whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. It is applicable to captive and domestic animals. It establishes the Animal Welfare Board of India or the Animal Board of India. Under Chapter 2, Section 4 of the Act, it ensures representation from the Ministries of Home Affairs and Education and MPs apart from the members from the Environment Ministry. It disallows all form of cruelty as mentioned in Section 11 subject to certain exceptions. Under Section 13 permits euthanasia for suffering animals without inflicting unnecessary pain, and Section 14 to 20 experimental on the animal under Chapter 4 activities such as pokes or dome, introducing substances into a female animal for creation of milk as per this law is allowed. The provisions which also regulate other the activities, there is a need to registration is required for the purpose of any such activities. Chapter 5th regarding performing animals, different forms of the punishment under the act includes both imprisonment with and without payment of fine. There are detailed provisions as to search and seizure and cognizance of offences by the police and judiciary. Nasirullah versus State, which was decided 2013, is an interesting case which provides the court reasoning in an combinations of conditions pertaining to the application of the Prevention of Cruelty Act 1960, Trans Vehicles Act 1988 and others similar such the laws which made certain restrictions. Slaughter in a recent case involving the Jallikattu and Bullock cart race in Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra, it was held that sports were violative of right of bulls under the act and that they shall not be used as performing animals in any case. Wildlife Protection Act 1972, this act extends to whole of India except Jammu and Kashmir. It is applicable to wild animal, birds, plants, etc. It provides for the establishment of important bodies and declaration of protected areas such as sanctuaries and national parks. Animal article refers to article made from captive or wild animal other than vermin and includes whole or part of has been used and ivory imported into India and article made therefrom. There are 6 scheduled appended to the Act, all of which provides for different degree of protection. Schedule 1 and Part 2 of this Schedule 2 provides absolute protection, and offences under this attract highest penalties. Offences under Schedule 3 and Schedule 4 attract lesser penalty. Schedule 5 includes vermin or animal that may be hunted, common crow, fruit, etc. Schedule 6 includes plants prohibited from cultivation and planting, red vanda, pitchers, plant, etc. made prohibited without the permission. The silent features of the Act as follow: cut. Thus, the Wildlife Protection Act, Cruelty to Animal Act considered to be very important legislation which primarily prohibits the hunting of any such animals. Especially under the Wildlife Protection Act, the government, the central government have power to create the national park, sanctuaries and other protected areas wherein the hunting of any such animal has been strictly prohibited. However, with the permission of the chief wildlife warden or other designated authorities, anyone want to do some sort of research activities, scientific basis or experimental basis, may get the permission of the chief wildlife warden and collect the specimen. One of the significant aspect of this Wildlife Protection Act, which not only preserves wild animal but also species and plant varieties, because many of the species and plant varieties are in extinction stage. Those species which falls within the purview of the schedule has been strictly prohibited. No person is allowed to take out this species without the permission of designated authorities. Therefore, these two important legislations has been appreciated by the Supreme Court through its dynamic interpretation. We come across many of the cases Supreme Court went ahead and protected the wildlife. Some of the important cases such as K.M. Chinnappa versus Union of India, Silent Valley case, or Goda Varman Thirumal Pad versus Union of India, all these cases, when you look at the decision of the court protected the preservation of the wildlife as against the developmental activities. And moreover, most of the developmental activities, especially the mining activities, has been strictly prohibited inside. In a case relating to mysterious death of elephants in the Mysore area, the court took summatory cognizance of situation that was reported by the press. The court brought attention to the Wildlife Protection Act 1972 as well as the provisions of the Constitution directing the State Board of Wildlife to review the situation periodically in order to keep itself informed of the untoward incident in the area. Another case relating to a criminal conspiracy between the accused persons for poaching and killing elephants in Kendrapat Reserve Forest, Odisha, and removing their tusk for illegal trade, in which the court did not release the accused persons on bail for violating both the Indian Penal Code 1860 as well as Wildlife Protection Act 1972 in order to resolve the man-wildlife conflict between protection of rhinos from poaching in the Kaziranga National Park and the settlement of dwellers in the region. The court in the instant case stated that the concept of national park in the Wildlife Protection Act contemplates that there should be no human habitation. The Center for Environmental Law versus Union of India and others 2013 Supreme Court is another case concerning the issues of settlement of rights in national parks and sanctuaries and other issues under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Though the judiciary has extensively made commendable efforts in checking the menace of wildlife crimes being committed across the country, more efforts are required at the local and state level for protection of wildlife. Recently, such an effort was made by some of the authorities. Tiger reserves in Karnataka, the number of tigers increased due to their involvement, and it was reported by international groups such as Survival International. Consequently, the tribe has become the first in India to have their right to live in a tiger reserve recognized. SAWEN, South Asian Wild Enforcement Network, is an intergovernmental wildlife law enforcement support body of 8 South Asian countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. It was launched in January 2011 in Bhutan. The government of India recently gave its approval to adopt the Statute of Tute. With this, India shall become a formal member of this convention. Number of the initiatives have been taken in order to prevent the crimes, wildlife crimes in India. One of the project is the Trilateral Transboundary Wildlife Interception, which focused on reduction in illegal wildlife trafficking in the Indian one-horned rhinos and Bengal tiger in particular. The project shall be implemented through law enforcement officers stationed at India-Nepal and India-China border crossing. SAWEN is being seen as a crucial step with regard to channelizing the collaborative effort of the countries involved. In order to curb transnational wildlife crimes, biosphere reserves, apart from sanctuaries, national parks, closed areas, community reserves and conservation reserves as provided for under the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. Protected area also includes biosphere reserves. These are large areas of protected land for conservation of wildlife, plants and animal resources and traditional life of the tribal living in the areas. 10 of the 18 biosphere reserves are a part of the World Network of Biosphere Reserves based on the UNESCO Man and the Biosphere Program list. Project Tiger is administered by the National Tiger Conservation Authority. It began in 1973 and under the project 49 tiger reserves are administered in the country. According to recent estimates, the number of tiger has grown to 2,500 tiger in 2006, and objective is to maintain viable population of tiger in the country for the benefit of for education and enjoyment of the future generation. Royal Bengal tiger is the national animal of India. Project Elephant is a centrally sponsored scheme that was launched as a centrally sponsored scheme in the year 1992 with the object of protecting of elephants, addressing issues of man-animal conflict and welfare of captive elephants. As of 2010, 32 elephant reserves have been formally notified by the various state governments. The elephant was designated as the National Heritage Animal in 2010 to focus more attention on the conservation of the species, conservation of flora, India in placed on the 10th position in the world and 4th in the Asia in plant diversity. Over 46,000 species of plants have been described by the Botanical Survey of India, of which 1,500 species are included in the vegetation cover. Due to the varied climatic conditions, different types of vegetations are found in the country, ranging from alpine vegetation and coniferous trees in the upper reaches of the Himalayas to thorny scrub in the desert of Rajasthan generally. A large pool of flora is found in areas of favorable climate conditions. These areas are susceptible to invasion by alien species which disturb the ecological balance of the region, bringing down the number of species. In India, the threat to Iceland group of Andaman and Nicobar and Lakshadweep could be detrimental to about 15% of plants species. The flora of the country is studied by the Botanical Survey of India, which carried out couple of the research activities on wild plant resources, fragile ecosystems and protecting areas, sanctuaries and national parks, biosphere reserves. It is responsible for the development of national database on herbarium, including type specimens. Conservation of flora is carried out at both national and state levels through different modes of conservation. There are two types of conservation, in situ and ex situ. In situ conservation refers to the conservation in a species natural habitat such as in protected areas. Ex situ conservation refers to conservation outside a species natural habitat such as botanical gardens, zoo, etc. Therefore, India is one of the richest nations in terms of biodiversity. Many initiatives have been undertaken at the international level which provides for biodiversity conservation in a holistic manner as well as the protection of wildlife, flora and fauna. Among these, CITES, CMS and couple of the authorities, UNEP, CBD, Earth Summit, etc. The international organization which deals with monitoring of illegal wildlife trade and helps to combat it. At the national level, the legislations comprised of acts like the Prevention of Cruelty to Animal Act 1960 and Wildlife Protection Act 1972. The implementation of these acts rests with important statutory authorities that have been created under these acts. Autonomous organizations such as the Zoological Survey of India and the Botanical Survey of India contribute through zoological and other surveys responsible which helps ascertain the conservation of statute of various species in the country. Thus, when we look at the legal regime of wildlife protection in India, primarily the statutes such as Wildlife Protection Act, Cruelty to Animal Act, which are very important legislation in order to protect the wildlife in India. Apart from, we also have couple of the provisions under the Indian Penal Code wherein one can file a criminal the litigation before the court. In India, under the Wildlife Protection Act, some of the important authorities have been created, that is Wildlife Board of India, wherein the Prime Minister of the country will preside over this Wildlife Board of India. If any decisions have to take for the purpose of the Wildlife Protection Act, when you look at the the interpretation of the Supreme Court have interpreted very strictly the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act. In a number of the cases we come across, mining activities in the wildlife areas has been strictly prohibited by the Supreme Court in order to preserve the plants and the animals, which are important for the purpose of maintenance of the ecology. Even the Wildlife Board of India, constituted by the central government, which are responsible for taking couple of the important decisions in order to preserve and protect the authorities. Under the Wildlife Protection Act, the national park, sanctuaries are the properties of the central government. No state government are allowed to divert the sanctuary or park for any other purpose other than this specified the purpose. Therefore, it is the responsibility on the part of authorities to implement the act properly in order to safeguard the rich biodiversity, including species, plant varieties and other resources of the country. Thus, there is a need to implement the provisions properly. This is end of the session. Thank you.